Keep going, Ethan. We're almost done. I watched over my son as he put the finishing touches on his science project. A model of the solar system spread across our living room table. Behind his glasses, Ethan's eyes sparkled as he carefully adjusted Mars' position. My reflection in the glass table showed me in my gray sweatsuit. Mom, is this good? Perfect. Your teacher will be so pleased with your presentation tomorrow. I gently stroked my son's brown hair. Lately, Ethan has been looking more and more like me. The same hair color, the same serious personality. But his innocent smile always warms my heart. I chose to be a freelance graphic designer precisely so I could cherish these moments with my son. Between work tasks, I made myself a warm coffee using the Keurig on the kitchen counter. The steam rising from the cup helped calm my nerves. The refrigerator was neatly stocked with organic ingredients I'd bought at Whole Foods over the weekend. The clock showed 9 p.m. Outside the window, the nightscape of Newton spread quietly. We had moved to this apartment 2 years ago, right after my divorce from Richard was finalized. The divorce had proceeded surprisingly smoothly. Richard and I had avoided getting emotional for Ethan's sake. We had mutually agreed on joint custody. Weekends with his father, weekdays with me. That became our new normal. At first, Ethan was confused. But as he came to understand that both parents were continuing to work together in raising him, he gradually adapted to the new rhythm of life. He no longer showed anxiety when going to his father's house. But recently, something had changed. Last weekend, when Ethan returned from his father's house, he seemed different. He had an expression like he wanted to say something, but ultimately didn't speak up. Richard had changed too. Phone conversations were brief and cold. We saw each other less frequently. As someone who knew the old Richard, his changes concerned me. He who had once been so meticulous now showed a tired face. His suits were wrinkled, lacking their former pristine appearance. Was he having problems as a middle manager at his IT company? But tonight, I'll set aside such worries. Ethan had completed his science project. I'm truly proud of his hard work. He had tackled the assignment from his elementary school science class with genuine dedication. He researched the sizes and orbits of the planets, determined the model scale, and was particular about the colors. Hey Mom, do you think Dad will come to see the presentation? I thought for a moment before answering. He seems busy with work, but I'll ask him. Ethan nodded silently. His expression seemed to mix hope with anxiety. At Summit Elementary School, where he rode the school bus each morning, Ethan was known as an excellent student. He received high praise from his teachers and had good relationships with his friends. The living room light gently enveloped us, mother and child. Outside the window, autumn winds rustled through the trees. Leaves were beginning to fall. These quiet moments were our daily routine. Ethan's stories about school, events with friends, and occasionally, talk about his father. However, I couldn't have imagined then that this peaceful night would take such an unexpected turn. All right, bedtime. Tomorrow's an important day, right? Yes. Ethan changed into his blue dinosaur print pajamas and brushed his teeth. Even during his bedtime routine, he couldn't take his eyes off the planet model. I couldn't help but smile at the sight. After finishing his bedtime snack of Oreo cookies and milk, Ethan headed to bed. The wall clock pointed to 11:30 p.m. The late autumn night was chilly, and outside, the sound of rustling leaves could be heard. From Ethan's bedroom came the sound of a child's steady breathing. Lying beside him, I checked my work schedule on my smartphone. 2 graphic design projects with approaching deadlines. They needed to be completed by the weekend. I checked my emails while keeping the screen brightness at minimum. Mom, today was fun. Suddenly, Ethan opened his eyes. Was he talking in his sleep, or was something bothering him? It's late. You need to sleep. The project turned out well, didn't it? Yes, you did a wonderful job, Ethan. I gently stroked my son's head. His dinosaur print pajamas glowed blue in the moonlight. I'm excited to show it to the teacher tomorrow. It's going to be a fantastic presentation. But first, you need to get proper rest. Ethan smiled contentedly and closed his eyes again. As I watched my son's sleeping face, I savored the happiness of this peaceful moment. His glasses were carefully folded and placed on the small shelf beside the bed. That's when my smartphone began to vibrate quietly. The sound of vibration cut through the silence. Looking at the screen, I saw a message from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment at the late-night message. Spam. Or perhaps an urgent message from an overseas client. When I unlocked the screen, a short message jumped out at me. Take your son and leave the house immediately. There's no time. Richard is coming. He's dangerous. I've contacted the police. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands trembled. I read the message again. The sender's number wasn't displayed. A joke? Or a wrong number? But my instincts were sending warning signals. Richard had been acting strange lately. I listened for sounds outside. The wind. The sound of distant car engines. And low footsteps. It took only seconds to make my decision. Ethan, wake up. I gently shook my son awake. Ethan rubbed his eyes sleepily. Ha! I'm sleepy. We need to be quiet. We're going to play hide and seek with Mom. Hide and seek. Like a game. But we have to be very, very quiet. I quickly helped Ethan put on his jacket and slipped his glasses into my pocket. Smartphone, wallet, house keys. I packed only the bare essentials into my bag. The emergency bag for my child was always ready in the closet. I had prepared it after the divorce, just in case. Mom, I'm scared. It's all right. Remember, it's just a game. I lifted Ethan. Though only 6, he was already heavy. But right now, I had to focus only on protecting him. Before stepping into the hallway, I listened again. Footsteps coming up the stairs. Heavy, familiar footsteps. Richard's footsteps. Perhaps due to alcohol, they seemed more irregular than usual. Just as I was heading for the back door, I heard the sound of the front doorknob turning. The locked door creaked. "Melissa." "Ethan." Richard's voice, low but clear. Different from his usual voice, containing something alien. I held my breath and hugged Ethan tightly. His small body trembled slightly. "Open up. Open the door." The sound of pounding on the door began. Ethan started trembling. I gently covered his ears. We rarely used the back door of this apartment building. However, when we moved in, the real estate agent had given us the key. I was grateful now to have that option. Moving through the kitchen, we headed toward the back door as quietly as possible. Moonlight streaming through the living room window illuminated our path. "That's Dad's voice." "Shh. It's okay." The moment I touched the doorknob, the footsteps outside stopped. The sound of someone stopping in front of the back door. My heart raced. "I know you're in there." Richard's voice now came from the back door. He had come around the house. Making a split-second decision, I hid behind a large houseplant in the living room. I gently lowered Ethan to the floor and covered him with my body. The plant's leaves enveloped us. In the moonlight, I could see a figure through the glass of the back door. It was Richard. But there was no trace of the husband I had known. Disheveled hair, wrinkled suit. In his hand, something gleaming. In the distance, sirens began to sound. The sound grew steadily louder. Richard's voice filled with panic. Then, hurried footsteps moving away. I held Ethan tightly. His trembling gradually subsided. The sirens drew closer. Red and blue lights began to shine through the windows. Then, from somewhere, a woman's voice called out. "Melissa." "Ethan. Are you okay?" That voice was familiar. It was Jennifer's voice, Richard's new wife. She approached cautiously, slowly. Her figure in a black jacket emerged in the moonlight. She seemed to have just changed out of her nurse's uniform. "Jennifer." I called out softly. She immediately turned toward the sound and found us hidden behind the plant. Thank goodness. As Jennifer approached with a relieved expression, suddenly, "Is someone there?" Richard's voice came from the backyard. Jennifer quickly ducked into the shadow of the plant. "Ethan." "It's Dad." His footsteps approached with an irregular rhythm. He was clearly drunk. His figure in the moonlight was so disheveled, I could hardly believe it was my former husband. Wrinkled suit, messy hair, bloodshot eyes. My heart nearly stopped. In Richard's right hand gleamed a metal gun. "Richard." Jennifer suddenly stood up and shouted. "Why are you?" Richard stopped moving. He stared at his wife with a confused expression. "That's enough." The police are right around the corner. Jennifer's voice maintained the composure of a nurse, but her hands trembled slightly. You called the police. Richard's voice changed to a low growl. I had to stop you trying to run away with Ethan. Shut up, Richard shouted. The gun in his hand wavered unsteadily. Are you trying to take my son away? Are you all trying to take everything from me? The sirens were getting very close now. Red and blue lights began to alternately illuminate the backyard. Dad! At Ethan's small voice, Richard's body tensed. Ethan! Where are you? I held my son tightly. Ethan's body was trembling. However, his voice was surprisingly steady. Dad, I'm scared. Those words stopped Richard in his tracks. With a clang, the gun fell from his hand. Richard collapsed to his knees, sitting there. At that moment, police officers rushed into the backyard. Several officers surrounded Richard. He showed no sign of resistance, just staring into space. Jennifer rushed over to us. Are you okay? Are you hurt? I nodded while still holding Ethan tightly. My son's trembling was gradually subsiding. Jennifer looked at me with an apologetic expression. I need to talk to you. But first. She caught the eye of one of the uniformed officers. A young female officer approached and spoke gently. Let me take your son somewhere safe. He can rest in the patrol car. I was still hesitant. I was afraid to let go of Ethan. It's okay, Jennifer said quietly. No one can hurt him now. I took a deep breath and slowly entrusted my son to the female officer. Though exhausted, Ethan seemed strangely calm. Mom. I'll be right there, sweetie. As I watched Ethan walk away with the officer, I felt the tension leaving my body for the first time. My knees nearly gave way. Jennifer supported my shoulder. Let's sit down. It's going to be a long night. We sat on a bench in the backyard under the moonlight. Richard had already been placed in a different patrol car and taken from the scene. All that remained was Jennifer and me, and the truth she was about to begin telling. Melissa. I'll tell you everything. About Richard's changes, his plans, and... Jennifer's voice trembled. Why I had to send that message. The interview room at Newton Police Station was brightly lit despite the midnight hour. The wall clock pointed to 2 a.m. Across from me sat Jennifer, looking exhausted. Her blonde hair was slightly disheveled, and the black jacket she had changed into from her nurse's uniform was wrinkled. In the next room, Ethan was sleeping under the watch of a female officer. Only after confirming my son's safety did I begin to feel some sense of calm returning. Let me start from the beginning. Jennifer took a drink from a water bottle with trembling hands. Richard started acting strange exactly 1 month ago. It began with a major failure at work. She sighed deeply. Her eyes held a penitent light. It started with something minor. He was severely reprimanded by his superior for overlooking subordinate misconduct. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. In the police station hallway, the footsteps of uniformed officers occasionally passed by. But this interview room felt like a space for just the two of us. Actually, Richard had been embezzling company funds. I caught my breath at those words. My meticulous, honest ex-husband. It started small. Just padding expenses. But it gradually escalated. Jennifer carefully chose her words as she continued. Eventually, it grew to $50,000. Gambling and drinking. He lost himself. I reached for the warm coffee placed on the desk. Its aroma helped organize my confused thoughts a bit. But why Ethan? Backed into a corner, he started planning to flee to Canada. And he wanted to take Ethan with him. Jennifer took out her smartphone and scrolled through the screen. I found it on his phone. Plane tickets to Toronto. A copy of Ethan's passport. A list of assets that could be converted to cash. No way. Yes. He was planning to take Ethan away tonight. The air in the room felt frozen for a moment. But why warn me? That message. Jennifer's expression darkened further. As a nurse, I see patients suffering every day. Especially those struggling with mental illness. Watching Richard, I could tell he was mentally cornered. She closed her eyes and continued. Recently, he started drinking every night. Said he couldn't sleep. But when drunk, he became aggressive, like a different person. I remembered how Ethan had looked when he returned from his father's house. My son's expression, seeming to want to say something. The fear hidden behind it. A week ago, after he passed out drunk, I checked his phone. That's when I learned everything. The embezzlement, escape plans, and Jennifer's voice caught. He had also prepared a gun. He bought it claiming it was for self-defense, but the real purpose. I felt a chill at her expression as she trailed off. That's when I decided. I had to stop him. But if I tried to stop him directly, he would surely become violent. So I provided information to the police, and warned you. But how did you get my number? The hospital system. Jennifer said apologetically. I had secretly noted down your number registered as Ethan's emergency contact. I sent it anonymously so Richard couldn't trace it. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and two detectives in suits entered the room. The older male detective began speaking quietly. Thank you both for your patience. We've finished questioning suspect Richard Wilson. Jennifer and I both leaned forward involuntarily. The suspect has admitted to everything. The company embezzlement, escape plans, and... The detective paused for a moment before carefully continuing. The attempted abduction of his son. Also, illegal possession of a firearm. The younger female detective added, spreading out some documents. Initial psychiatric evaluation indicates suspected severe alcohol dependence plus acute stress disorder. Treatment. To my question, the older detective responded. We'll await the court's decision, but forced hospitalization in a psychiatric facility will likely be necessary first. Then, after rehabilitation programs. Suddenly, there was a sound from the hallway. Turning around, we saw Ethan standing with the female officer. Rubbing his eyes, he wore an anxious expression. "Mom." I immediately stood up and embraced my son. Is Dad sick?" The air in the room grew tense at that question. I looked straight into Ethan's eyes and answered in as gentle a voice as possible. "Yes. Dad's mind is a little sick right now. But it's okay. The doctors will help him get better." Ethan nodded silently. His expression showed a depth of understanding beyond his 6 years. "Then will Dad come visit again when he gets better?" To that question, I hesitated for a moment. But Jennifer gently spoke up. "Of course, Ethan. But first, Dad needs to get proper treatment. It might take some time, but..." "Okay, I understand." Ethan rested his head on my shoulder, looking tired. The detectives quietly stood up and began gathering their documents. "Ma'am, we'd like to speak with you again tomorrow morning." "Yes, of course." The older detective finally looked at Ethan. His eyes showed a fatherly kindness. "You did well, son." Ethan smiled shyly. As we left the interview room, the sky outside was beginning to show the first hints of light. The eastern sky was taking on a slight reddish tinge, heralding the start of a new day. Jennifer approached us. "Melissa, Ethan. I'm so sorry. If only I had realized sooner." I shook my head. "If you hadn't warned us, who knows what might have happened." Ethan looked up at Jennifer with sleepy eyes. "Thank you, Aunt Jennifer." At those words, tears glistened in Jennifer's eyes. As we left the police station, an uncertain future lay before us. Yet it was clear that new bonds had been formed through this ordeal. And in the dawn's light, we headed home. 3 months had passed since the incident. While preparing breakfast, I watched Ethan through the kitchen window as he waited for the school bus. "Ethan, don't forget your scarf." My son, wearing his blue dinosaur backpack, waved with a smile, showing me his red scarf. As usual, other children from the apartment complex gathered around him. Since the incident, our neighbors had become even more attentive to us. The coffee maker released its fragrant aroma. Though my graphic design work remained as busy as ever, I had decided never to sacrifice these morning moments with Ethan. My smartphone vibrated. A message from Jennifer. "Is 3 p.m. still good for today's visit?" As I typed my reply, I recalled yesterday's counseling session. Dr. Martin, the attending physician, had shown a cautiously optimistic view of Richard's recovery. His recovery from alcohol dependence is progressing well. He seems to be gradually preparing to face his responsibility for the embezzlement case. The doctor's words still echoed in my ears. After seeing Ethan off on the school bus, I turned to my work desk. Next to the monitor sat a photo of my son receiving the Excellence Award for his science project. The week after the incident, Ethan had given his presentation as planned and won the prize. In the afternoon, I visited the psychiatric ward of Boston General Hospital. While waiting in the visiting room, Jennifer arrived, looking sprightly. In her nurse's uniform, her expression seemed brighter than before. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Melissa." "No, I just got here myself." We waited together for a few minutes. The door opened, and Richard entered. Though wearing hospital-issued white pajamas, his expression was calmer than before. His hair was neatly groomed, and his eyes were gentle. "Melissa, Jenny." He greeted us in a soft voice. How is Ethan doing?" "He's well. He got a perfect score on his math test last week." Richard's eyes moistened at those words. "I see." He took a deep breath and looked straight at us. "I'm so sorry to both of you. For that night, and for everything." He had apologized many times during previous visits. But today's words carried a deeper sense of remorse. Embezzling company money, putting Ethan in danger. I did unforgivable things. Richard. Jennifer quietly took her husband's hand. "But what matters now is moving forward. You're definitely getting better." Richard nodded slightly. "I heard from the doctor." I carefully chose my words as I continued. "They might be able to consider discharge in about 3 months. "Yes. But I'll need to continue outpatient treatment after that. The doctor says the battle with addiction is lifelong." His words showed strength in facing reality. As for visiting Ethan, it might take a bit more time. "But letters." Richard's eyes lit up at my suggestion. "Really? Would Ethan accept them?" "Yes. He worries about you every day." At those words, Richard choked up. Jennifer gently rubbed his back. As visiting hours drew to a close, we stood up. Richard gazed out the window and spoke quietly. "I'm truly grateful for this chance to rebuild my life. I will definitely rehabilitate myself, for Ethan's sake." On the way back, Jennifer and I stopped in the hospital courtyard. Even in the harsh winter cold, early spring's presence could be felt beginning to emerge. "Melissa." Jennifer looked at me with a determined expression. "Let's continue supporting each other even after Richard is discharged. For Ethan's sake." "Yes, let's do that." I nodded with a smile. In the evening, Ethan returned from after-school care, seeming more energetic than usual. "Mom." Today, the science teacher told us about a new project. My son's eyes sparkled. His innocent smile warmed my heart. "What kind of project?" "Recording plant growth. We get to observe how seeds sprout and leaves grow. A project about watching new life born and grow." What a wonderful symbol, I thought. After dinner, Ethan started on his homework. I sat beside him and picked up my smartphone. On the screen remained a draft email from this morning. "Through today's visit, I feel we've taken a new step forward as a family." Outside, a gentle dusk enveloped the town. Tomorrow would bring another new day. Our story was still continuing.